What's up, everybody? Jeff and Control Robinson here with another episode of The Pylon Show. It's episode 15. We're going to do a really quick one because some of these guys got some places to be, but in order of sexual intensity and interest as far as I'm concerned, if they're available, I'm available. It's going to be Dan Artosis Stemkowski, my co-host. Enjoying that hot Korean summer, are you?
It's brutal. Yesterday was the hottest day ever recorded, I believe, in Korea. So
I want to get it hotter. I think we can do better.
23 or something. I'm not sure exactly, but it was insane. And I was just outside for 5 minutes, and I'm covered in sweat. It's wild.
A likely story. Thank you, Dan. Dan, by the way, just to get this out there way out in advance, Dan has to go. He's got a call time for the wonderful GSL versus the World show today. So this is going to be about a 45-minute episode or so, and then the three of us, who I'll introduce in a second, will end the show with just a quick few things. But we have our repeat offender here. If you could silence the child, Dan. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine. I'm just kidding. She can be as silly and cute as much as she wants. That's Dan's wife, by the way, everybody. So she's a little bit younger than he is. That's inappropriate. That's his daughter. I shouldn't make those jokes. Ravi, how are you doing, buddy? You're in Korea. What the hell are you doing over there?
I'm doing well.
I'm
Ravi,
here
by
for
the way.
GSL versus the World. I messed up your name. Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. I just assume whatever.
I know.
But yeah, I'm doing fine. Besides the fact that I'm at like 5 hours of sleep because I'm still technically working.
Oh.
So I'm like in meetings from 12 a.m. to like 3:30 in the morning. And I sleep for like 4 or 5 hours, and I wake up, and then I do some work, and then I go to the GSL studio. So it's going to be a hell of a week, Jeff.
Are you commentator, or do you just send yourself to go hang out?
No, I'm just sending myself.
That's awesome.
I've gone to Korea every year for the past like 3 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Zombie Girl's over there as well. Is she just vacationing as well? Or are you guys just hanging out?
She I think besides this year, she like has spent a month or so in Korea for the past like 2 years.
Okay.
Every single year. So
very cool.
Yeah. She's a lot more intense than I am.
Well, all the cool cats are over there, including this giant lump of sexual just awesomeness. We have no regret making his third or fourth appearance on the show. You're like
I think it's my third, but it's my first with you, so I'm excited for it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's proven that we're not the same person. Jake, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming on, by the way.
Doing great. I'm glad to be here. Love talking about StarCraft with you guys.
It's going to be fun. So just a roadmap for everybody. This is a quick episode, like I said, but we're going to cover some fun subjects. So the first one we're going to talk about, we're going to do This Week in StarCraft, but in reverse order. We're going to do that at the end. We'll do some questions from the Patreon, of course, and then the regular Discord group as well. Dan won't be here for that for the most part because we want to jump into some really good topics. We're just going to cover a couple here. The first one is the best article in the world, which was written by a TL writer, Team Liquid that is, Mr. Ollie. It has some pretty good discussion about it, and I'm going to do my best to lay it out and talk about it and give you guys a fair and hopefully unbiased look at what it is, and then we're going to go around the board and talk a little bit about it because I think it's an interesting discussion. Then we're going to talk about GSL versus the World. It starts today, tonight if you are... Well, actually just tonight for everybody, I believe. It's in the morning in Korea for you three, but later today for them and for me late at night. We're going to do predictions.
5 hours or so?
5 hours?
5 hours.
Okay, 5 hours from now. Jake obviously knows a lot of the guys really intimately well, so we're going to get an insider look, and then Ravi the fan and Dan the commentators. We'll check it out. And then Cheeseadelphia is an event that just happened, a non-Korean mostly event put on, kind of a grassroots thing. Ravi was there as a commentator, so that's really awesome. And then we'll wrap it up with the stuff I talked about. So we're going to just jump right into it, guys, so we can get this discussion underway before Dan has to go. So I know I'm doing a lot of talking up front, but I'm going to lay this out. I'm going to talk about what its two main points really were, and then I'm going to pass it off to you guys. So this article was written on Team Liquid, and I think Cobra just showed you guys kind of where it is. You can go to Team Liquid there. It's like already it's just been at the top of the discussion over there under the general section for a while, but I think it's under their news. Somebody can link it in chat if they're a moderator, Hallelujah or Cobra or something like that if you guys want to check it out. The general gist of this article is that it had two kind of major points of criticism is what I would say. So the first one was, well, I'm not even sure if it's the first, but the first one that I'm going to limelight for us was lazy narrative. So it kind of talked about how a lot of commentators fall into the trap, if you will, of describing innovation as solely a macro monster, or Beyond as having the best micro in the world, and surely his micro can get him out of this. But the examples go on. Cyril, the best foreigner. And it kind of talked about how if a commentator latches onto that concept, it gets in the way of perhaps talking about other attributes or other elements of them in the game or how they function in the scene, that kind of stuff. And the last one hits a little bit closer to home for one of our commentators because it was kind of mostly a criticism against Tastosis, but it's certainly not exclusively to them. But it talked about hyperbole in commentating and talked about how when commentators say this is the most amazing game we've seen in a while, or this is the highest level of play we've seen in years, or whatever. Basically, if you talk about hype commentary, there's going to be some hyperbole. The author raised this up as an issue as well, saying that other esports scenes seldom or never use hyperbole and instead stick to the facts, or try to very accurately portray what's going on. If you don't think my assessment is correct or good, that's fine. You can fuck right off and go read the article for yourself. I'm trying to speed this up and just give you guys a gist of it without putting my opinions out there. That was kind of, I feel like, unless one of these guys wants to tell me I got something really wrong, that's pretty much what it was talking about. So before we get to, I think we want to have a gradual pickup here. I want to go to Dan's second, because it was actually Ravi that drew this article to my attention. Him and Maynard were kind of the first two that I saw on Twitter, to kind of respond to this and talk about it. And Ravi, you can start wherever you want, but what were your thoughts about this article that was kind of criticizing the StarCraft 2 casting style, I guess?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this one. So I guess to go in the order that you brought them up, which is, I think, the reverse order for the article or whatever, but there was a hyperbole thing and there was the the lazy narratives thing. So to me, the hyperbole thing, all the examples I used were Tastosis, but I actually think Brown Bear had a really good counterpoint article where he actually goes through a bunch of the previous GSL finals and recorded, said, okay, this is where they've said things along the lines of this, the greatest Zerg player, the greatest game of all time, blah, 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 and did a point-by-point statistical analysis, and was actually it doesn't happen that often. What I really like about how Brown Bear did it also actually builds into the second thing about lazy narratives, is that I feel as though the lazy narratives thing, it's not as big of an issue to me as Ollie makes it out to be, because a lot of the time that people are saying oh, innovation is this macro monster, Beyond's micro is the big one that Ollie keeps using. I don't feel like many commentators tend to pin the results of a game as much on that is just because this person's micro is the best in the world or so great or anything. I feel like a lot of the time it's the pregame talk. And I don't really think that I don't recall in reading the article and seeing any distinction about pregame talk versus postgame talk. Because if you're going to paint that kind of narrative, you're doing that in the pregame because the game hasn't happened yet. You want to say, here are the most notable qualities about this player. And then postgame, you're saying, here's what happened in that game. And how does it build back into that narrative if it does at all? So to me, that's where I kind of disagree the most. I feel like a lot of that kind of narrative building happens in the earlier stage before a tournament game rather than after.
So I'm going to moderate this pretty heavily. Just because I feel like we all want to say a lot, but I'm also going to play devil's advocate because it is 3.5 commentators here. We have infiltrated Jake Umbleby, and we can see him morphing into a commentator. So rather than just turning it into a hate fest on the article, I'm going to try to pose some questions. I hear what you're saying, Ravi, but I feel like what the author and what the criticism is trying to leverage towards is that very often space is filled with just this is what that player is. It doesn't necessarily mean that any mention of it is bad. It just means that instead of flushing out and talking about other things about Beyond, as the example goes, we just very often are look at his micro. He's going to go for that drop again. His micros are so fantastic. Look at the 8 Marines split apart. He's target firing the Banelings. Wow, this guy's so incredible. And that's all that gets mentioned for the most part. Is that not? Is that a bad thing?
So I would disagree with that based on the basis of, and I'll just leverage Brown Bear's article where he gives examples, I think, even from like I think it's from the GSL finals or something with Beyond and stuff, where he literally goes through and just picks out a bunch of points during that finals where commentators are basically being like, yeah, here's like Beyond's really awesome macro, or like, oh, this is really amazing strategic decision making for Beyond. Like, I think that other aspects of these players' play are complemented and built up and hyped up. So I think that part is.
So you think it's unfounded, is what you're saying? You think that
I think it's a bit exaggerated. Like I do think, of course, there's like a bit of a focus on those qualities because those are most notable things.
Okay.
But I don't think it's like to a fault.
And to again keep up building the tension to the Artos response, I want to go to our halfling here, Jake Umbleby. Surely commentators are guilty of this stuff, right? You guys in the house talk about it. Do you think commentators tend to get a little bit too lazy with their narratives and just stereotype players?
I mean, I agree with most of what Ravi said. I think stereotypes kind of come down to like what's most notable from you. It's not necessarily like the only thing you can do. When someone says I'm good with Zerglings, I don't think they literally like that's the only thing I'm gonna do. But it is like something that's most notable because you see it throughout all of my games. You know, it's obvious why this happens. I just don't think it's either. I don't think it's really a bad thing. I don't think it takes away, like, if you can't list everything that this player has, every quality, it doesn't take away from them, in my opinion. It's just like the most notable fact. Like when you say Björn is like a micro master, I don't feel like that's a bad point, or like that you're focusing on one point of his. I think that's just like what's most notable, right? Like kind of like a nickname.
Okay.
Same with like in control, or not in control. Sorry, cannons in control.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know. It's just my opinion. I didn't actually read the article, so I don't want to talk too much about it.
Okay, fair enough.
But
well, here's a guy that did read it about it. Dan, we're first going to talk about lazy narratives. Do you have? I mean, what are your thoughts about kind of that criticism, Leverage Shorts commentating?
Well, if I could start a couple things to say about this. So I actually wasn't going to read this. I saw that this article came up, and then you messaged me and told me to read it because we were going to talk about it today. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I will. I generally try to avoid reading things like this. I like criticism. I actually I look for criticism. Like, I mean, Jake, every time we cast together, you know, in between on commercials, I'm like, how do you think it's going?
You do.
What's going on? You know, I'm always doing that.
Yep.
Jeff commentated plenty of times with you. It's, I want.
It's very good, actually. I like that. Like, okay, just to derail everything, I guess.
Please.
When you ask me something like this, because for me, as a less experienced commentator, I'm not going to go out of my way to object or say what I think's happening. But if you come and ask me, it makes it a lot easier to kind of talk about it. So I really appreciate that. Sorry, side note.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, it's just kind of to show, like, I read this article just a few minutes ago before we went live, and so first off, I am the only commentator called out by name in the entire article. Okay. And I think and here's the thing, here's part of why I didn't want to read it, is because of who wrote it. This Ollie guy, this is the same guy that caused a massive drama a couple years ago because commentators weren't retweeting links to Team Liquid articles about players. So like already the source it's coming from, for me personally, it's not a worthwhile read, but we're talking about it on the show. So here we are. So anyways, I read it, and to the fact that I am the only person actually called out by name. Well, here's the thing. It's really easy to find whatever you're looking for with my commentary. I've actually commentated more top-level StarCraft than everyone else in the world. I am actually the leader on that, okay? I'm in 35 seasons of GSL. I've done the second most events after Roddy, I would say. So it's like you can find whatever you want to back up whatever you want to say about my commentary. You can find it, absolutely. And just reading it, I was kind of looking at it and saying, wow, this doesn't feel right. So I'm happy to hear that Brown Bear went through and recorded it and saw that I don't say all these things so much that it is accused of, that I am, I guess, accused of. And I'm sure that he meant more than just me, but I am, again, the only person that it says in the article. But for instance, some of the things that were written in it,
you're kind of ramping up for a big response.
Okay.
We're going to talk about lazy narrative first. You're going to get everything you want to say, though. I'm not cutting you off. I just want to kind of keep it compartmentalized.
So lazy narrative. Okay, so like I think it's good to have something that is related with each and every player. This is something I personally have been working hard on being able to do. Let me give an example of someone that I've had the hardest time to do this with. There's this one pro gamer that I can't figure it out what to like line him up with, and I really have put in a ton of effort to try to figure this out, and it's patience. There isn't like I don't
Patience
know what
blinks, man.
What do you say about? Yeah, I know there's like a meme about him blinking into things, but like that's not, you know. You want for different players to have various attributes that you can talk about. It adds a lot of flavor to it. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you have this micro-based aggressive Terran and Beyond, and then you have him going up against the Shield of Ire, the greatest defensive Protoss stats, right? That's an interesting narrative in my opinion. And the narrative doesn't change. We keep getting the same players, right? So it's like, yeah, we've seen these two play before, and Beyond normally gets destroyed. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really agree that there is a lazy narrative. I'm sure that, again, all of us have commentated a lot, especially me. So you can find whatever you're looking for. But I actually put a lot of time and effort trying to figure out ways to do this, right? Like I came up with the 4 horsemen of Terran when we had 4 Terrans that were at the top of the world, right? And I'm like, wow, that's kind of a cool thing, right? And I feel like nicknames are fantastic. I was so happy when the Korean commentators nickname stats the Shield of Ire. I think it's super cool that Showtime is called the Wall, right? Like these
in
are
German, though. It's really cool.
Really cool. That like just it's cool. I don't know, but I don't feel like there's a lazy narrative.
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Comment on this. So another interesting thing I just thought about is like for pro gamers, because I'm kind of it, but I'm around them. They kind of do the same thing with other players as well, where it's not like we're not going into a huge in-depth thing, but like we have like this line of how to describe somebody to prepare for them. And it's kind of the same thing, right? For example, like Haas, you put a line with him like how he's aggressive or whatever. And it's kind of the exact same thing. You're not going to go and describe every little thing or anything, but you're putting a narrative to him immediately so that when you play against him, you keep that in the back of your mind. And I think the same thing can be applied to what casters are doing.
Yeah.
Like where you're not going to pull out your fucking notebook and flip it and give all the, what they actually are. But just like a TLDR, like if TLDR didn't read Haas, this is how he is kind of thing.
Yeah, I think
I see players doing the exact same.
In fact, just to double down on this, I don't think I have lazy narratives. Like, look at DreamHack Valencia. If I wasn't there, were there going to be good stories told about Haas and how he's a quality player and what he's done in GSL recently? I don't think so. I think people have been like, oh, he's going to lose. He's a cannon rusher. And then he would have gotten to the fucking finals. And, it's, I don't know.
I did feel like that was that had the most narrative, like Haas getting to the finals, like off basically the biggest underdog for every single time. You're like, okay, this is it. You can't possibly make it through this one, right? And then we finally go up against the final boss. I thought that the narrative was really good there, and I do think you were the one who was pushing that narrative really early on. So
not to flip it on you too much, Dan, but I think the narrative of he can't possibly make it any further than him keep going is more interesting than you in the background flailing saying he's gonna do it. Sorry, but I know you like to take credit for a lot of things, but we'll get to the part where you take a lot of credit in the article. I think going across the board, I think one of the interesting kind of what I'm hearing voice-wise is that we all kind of feel, nobody said it this way, but I'm going to say it. Yes, casters have a lazy narrative, but I think the lazy narrative becomes a negative connotation that doesn't apply. I feel like the idea of giving a player a moniker or some kind of thing that they're known for and then using that as a narrative device throughout the cast is actually important. And I think this article comes from a more hardcore viewer place where, of course, more time spent breaking down everything that is Beyond to the hardcore fan would be really interesting and awesome. But I feel like what gets lost sight, and this is actually really frustrating because a lot of StarCraft fans, and this is going to be, I'm going to segue into the other issue, because I feel like this is applicable there. A lot of StarCraft fans are this really tremendous mix of like, I fucking love StarCraft. That's all that I do. It's so hardcore. I love it. All the games suck. It's the best game ever. And then there's a lot of other fans who are like, I used to be into StarCraft. I have no idea what's going on right now, but I want to watch some StarCraft because that's a part of my childhood. And then there's, of course, a mix of other people that are just checking it out and et cetera, et cetera. We had 87,000 people watching WCS Valencia, which was 50,000 higher than we had the year before. So there's a huge mix of people. But I get one of the criticisms that you see thrown out a lot in the Team Liquid chat, their live report threads and stuff like that, is people constantly being like, man, I wish they wouldn't spend so much time hyping up this player or talking about these things that don't really matter. And this is, again, the segue into the next subject, but I feel like people need to think outside of themselves a little bit more. If we break down Boxer to being the super genius mega micro god, it's not because that's all that he is. It's because that's an easy concept for people to latch onto, and it builds like a hero story, so they can be like, wow, when he does that thing, that's his secret weapon. If we go ahead.
We're also time constrained a lot on when and how we can bring up certain things. Like, it's kind of cool because on the Pylon show, right, we have all this time, we can talk for as long as we want on anything and elaborate fully on anything. If I'm in a broadcast, right, I know that I might have 30 seconds before the camera shots are flipping. We have to get into the game, or maybe it's in the middle of a battle. And so there's like, you have to really be picky about what you bring out at that point.
I think actually Dana did a really awesome podcast or like some interview thing right before he hosted the International, where he actually talks a lot about this. And the phrase or like the term he would use is he calls them like anchors. So effectively, if you have like a new viewer that's trying to understand something, or you're trying to basically create a compelling story at all for them, you want to have these anchors where you say, okay, this person has like a 85% win rate with this character or something in Dota. It's like, okay, well, that is now something that I didn't know anything about Dota, and now I want to watch and I want to see, is that character going to be picked? I have known nothing about picking and banning in Dota or whatever, but now I want to see, like, this person has a really high win rate with this character. Like, that's something I want to see. Or it's like the same thing as if you show someone like, hey, here's a game of baseball. You know nothing about the rules of baseball. You're explaining this, and you say, this person has done a perfect game. And then you explain them like the bare bones basic of what a perfect game is. Well, that's now a compelling narrative, or a compelling narrative. Obviously, the entire game is not just that. There's all kinds of other intricacies going on. But that's what grips some of the newer people who don't necessarily need to know all the intricacies in order to like have that kind of compelling story.
Okay. I do want to move on to I think this was the more emotionally charged part of the criticism, because this is where Artosis was named specifically, but also Tastosis was the other reference. So I think you can say Nick was pretty much, I mean, you know, you guys are a pair. Certainly the implication wasn't that it's just you guys, but it just basically talked about hyperbole in commentary, which if that's too big of a word for some of our Eurobros out there or something like that, we're talking about hype casting. Generally speaking, so talking, you know, the finals that does get casted by Tastosis predominantly. Again, to lay the groundwork, he was talking his specific issue, but you can kind of blur the lines a little bit, was about how each time someone says, this is the greatest finals we've ever had, or this is the best player in the world, like that kind of hyperbole. And Dan, this is something that I thought you were kind of building up to talking about, so if you want to take it off. Take it away.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I know I don't say things like that very often. And I'm just speaking for myself. I know that I don't, and apparently Brown Bear went through and shows that I really don't. Like, one thing I did say a lot recently was that one of the seasons this year, the round of 32, is the best we've ever had, and the overall season is the best we ever had. And I think it is true. And I think everyone I've spoken to is like, yeah, no, this was a crazy season of GSL.
Well, so you are taking it very personal. I would play the devil's advocate again and just tell you, it's specifically Nick, right? And you guys are a pair. Nick does say stuff like this a lot.
I mean, maybe he says some stuff like that. I don't know. I can't really answer for Nick.
Okay,
but I
see
my name written here, and I see, you know, I'm just like,
let me answer for Nick.
It's out that like there's this one thing that's pointed out, right, from 2017 Katowice, that apparently I said no one can do that when a Reaper distracted a mothership core. And he actually talks about that a lot through the article, how Counter-Strike casters don't do that or something. And I'm like, okay, well, there's like a lot to that. For instance, right, this one line that I said in the Katowice finals, like, I mean, I don't personally remember saying that. Maybe when I said it, I felt like it was a stupid thing to say, or maybe I liked it when I said it. I'm not exactly sure. But there's a lot going on in a broadcast, right? like for instance, so like Nick and I will cast very quickly in a finals, right? It's almost just like a flow. You just open your mouth and you go, and it's like you're keeping the hype up, you're keeping the excitement up. I don't remember saying that specifically, but it's like this is a very nitpicky little thing. Okay, you didn't like that. Okay, that's fine. Yes, other people could distract a mothership core. Yes. Now, there's something about being emotionally true in broadcasting as well, right? If I'm casting to a full stadium in Katowice, which is, to be honest, mostly Counter-Strike people, but they're watching some StarCraft, they're trying to have a good time, and it's this live event, you don't cast it exactly the same as a round of 32 GSL. You know, if he does this move and it's a game-breaking move because he gets a Widowmine drop-off, I'm gonna give that its proper due, where it's like, wow, this is a very important moment, and maybe I did not choose the words correctly there or something, but it is an important moment, right? So, I mean, if you do what he's talking about, how like a Masters level player can do that, I'm like, he pulls the mothership core away, like Masters and above can do this. It's like that. Well, you can't.
I was gonna say, clarifying your point, like during the cast is just like a really good way to just like derail the whole thing, you know? Like the whole point is it may be a little bit of an over exaggeration, but it's not like out of the realm of what you're trying to emphasize, which is like, this is a unique thing. Sure, people do it, but it's just, you know, but really, I don't think you should have to clarify exactly what you're saying. You know what I mean? Especially when you're trying to get it out as fast as possible.
Let me jump in, because maybe the ethos of the conversation or something like that is, Dan, it sounds like a little defensive, and I actually think we can own this. I think you were getting close there with your response towards the end, but it's like, I don't see this as a criticism at all. It gets weird. It is a criticism, but I see it as like an actual fact of commentary. And I 100% agree with your statement, where it's like, if you want to look through all of Tastos' commentary, you'll absolutely find evidence of anything that you want to try and prove a point. But my thing is, say like exactly what Jake just said in that moment. If he's like, this is of equal skill level to the top 10% on each ladder, but maybe not North America, this is an amazing moment in time. Like, that's not how you say it. It's not even how you do it. And if you want to, and the closest you get to a criticism, in my opinion, is if you want to latch down specifically at instances where Nick or Dan or anybody said, this is the best finals we've had in a long time, and be like, well, technically, then it's like, okay, you can have that debate, but I feel like you lose a lot of your teeth, because it's the commentator's job, and we're specifically told by our employers, but also these experienced individuals know that the far and away better response is to just hype the fuck out of it, right? Like, some of Nick's calls, my calls, whoever's calls in the finals, sometimes they're off because you're lost in the moment. Literally, you're like, this drop could end the game, and then they feed back 3 medevacs and they pop, and you're like, wow, that was really wrong. And if you stopped that and like made a video about how I hate when commentators predict things that are wrong, you'll be right, I guess. But in the moment of that series, when everyone's shouting, it's feeling great, it's amazing, and a couple of comments go out where this amazing brainy move is pulled off, and it's like, yeah, I guess some Masters players do that. Should we let Dan get away with a comment that it's like, this is like only he can do that? That's an amazing moment. For a huge audience, 95%, no, StarCraft, it's 80 to 85% of people who don't know. They don't want to hear the specific statistics of like, well, that's something that only the top 10% of people can do. They want to hear, that's a special moment, that's incredible, and then it's past them. It's an emotional moment in time. I feel like it gets really weird when we break down StarCraft commentators and start to be like, you can't say stuff like that ever. And then especially, and this is really weird for me too, because this gets into a scary territory, I watch a lot of CSGO. So if you're going to tell me CSGO commentators don't do that, I'm going to kind of laugh at you a little bit, because you can absolutely go through their commentary and find them talking about the in-game shot caller who got 30 kills. And they're like, there's no other in-game shot caller that's getting that many kills. Or the opper that's like mobile and killing, and it's like he's just in the top of his game, moving locations and opping, when that's like the style of most of the top oppers. And he actually, even the article kind of says that, it's like, well, but Kenny S was the best. And it's like, the second you start to kind of in your own article kind of go back and forth about how sometimes people are the absolute best, but in StarCraft, I know that master players can pull off that move. I feel like it's starting to be something about nothing, right?
So one thing I want to talk to about is the StarCraft can arguably evolves a lot. Like this game is 8 years old, right? If you look back at the first GSL finals, you're gonna go, "What the hell is going on here?" Like, this is the most unoptimal build I've ever seen. This doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no logic going on here. They're just building whatever. They're throwing them random. You know what I mean? Like, it looks like it's just a totally different game. So when we're talking about how this is the most competitive StarCraft's ever been, or this is the highest skill level, it's actually kind of true. Like, if you want to argue that it isn't, that again, these are your opinion, and this is our opinion, my opinion. But there you can prove that it is true. Like, the skill level is just constantly going up. It's constantly going up. You can compare last year to this year. You'll see huge skill differences in the players because it just happens. People have been playing longer. People are figuring out how to play more efficiently. There are better. The metagame is shifting constantly.
Jake, there's a point you're building up to, right?
Yeah. So when we say this is the most competitive round of 32 or whatever,
okay.
I personally believe it's true. It's true.
Well, it is true. That thing, it's like maybe that was part of what he was calling out. And the thing is, I've casted all of them. And that was the best season.
Yeah.
It was. I watched them all. Every episode. I never missed a day of GSL. What do you want?
Well, I think one thing we can take away from it, too, I actually really, and this is a wisdom thing, if you go back a couple years, you can probably find some really angry and control tweets. In fact, maybe it's 20 minutes ago. I don't know. Sometimes I get into a red haze. I actually like criticism, like Dan said. I think it's something that we should encourage. I didn't know about Ollie and the drama. I forgot that was him. I would say some criticism for the article. Naming only Artosis and then like the secondary naming of Tastosis is going to, like, you can hear the defensiveness in Dan's voice. That's because he's named. Like, that's not really fair. Then the article becomes a little bit more of a hit piece as opposed to a criticism against StarCraft 2 commentary, right?
This happens a lot too, right? Because I do commentate so much. Like the other day, well, not the other day, but a couple months ago, Jeff, I know you were around for this. Like Wax was tweeting about how great a job you guys are doing on WCS Challenger. Mm-hmm. Like Wax Angel was tweeting about that. And he mentioned that like GSL casters bend over backwards to explain like how something weird that happened.
How good.
And how he didn't like that, but he liked how you guys are just like, wow, this is dumb. Right. And so, I mean, the thing is, I'm like, okay, no, I'm happily open to criticism, but I don't do that. When someone does something stupid, literally the night before I had been saying how dumb someone's moves were in GSL. And so I called him out on that and he immediately backed up and took it back. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like this happens a lot where people want very badly to call out. The thing is, I'm so open to criticism. And I mean, even this article makes me think about these things, but I don't know. When I read the way that it's written and you're picking out one thing from a 2017 finals of a live hype ass event, and that's like the one direct link, and it's like, what am I supposed to do with this? This isn't useful to me.
Yeah, and I think that's where the article falls off a little bit. It's just that it had narrowed examples that it like made the whole premise of, and then for a critical article like that, you really have to follow it up with like what you would like to see, as opposed to, and this is where it gets a little bit defensive on their side, where it's like, look at these other esports where the commentators don't do that. And then for us as commentators, that those are our friends, and for me, I watch a ton of the games that he mentioned. It's just not true as well. Then it becomes hard to digest that criticism, because then you're like, well, it's just not true, and he named my friend Dan, and that's it, and then kind of said it's all StarCraft 2 commentary, but that also isn't true, right? So it's hard.
Well, I don't understand why, like, you can find this with almost every caster, so I don't know why Dan is specifically called out. Like, I could have put a notepad link to like 30 different times this has happened with all different casters from almost everybody. It just happens. The whole point is we're directing the flow of the show. Our emotions directly represent like how engaged the audience gets. If you over-exaggerate something, it's not a problem, in my opinion. Like getting people more interested, especially the casuals. Sure, if I'm sitting there as a pro player and I'm like, well, technically, this is not the only player that could do this. Like, no one cares. Really, no one cares. But the point is, you're engaging the audience. You make the audience feel like they're a part of something that's new, something that's unique. Like, I'm a part of a new experience. This is the highest level StarCraft's ever been, right? maybe right or wrong, but the viewer feels that way. They feel more engaged to the storyline. They feel more engaged to the tournament they're watching. In my opinion, I think that's always a benefit. Even if the pro gamer or whoever the really hardcore viewer is like, oh, this isn't for me. Like, if we're bringing in 10 new people for this one guy who's like, I don't like this casting, then in my opinion, it's always worth it.
Okay, well, we only have Dan for a few moments, so any final thoughts from you guys?
I mean, no, I feel like I basically said the things there, and I mean, I'm always trying to improve. So, no one's perfect, and I definitely make plenty of mistakes. And you can find plenty of stupid, wrong things that I say because I commentate a lot. But hopefully, I can I don't know, work hard and keep improving.
I have a thought.
Go for it,
this
Ryan.
actually goes back to what Dan was talking about with how that Ollie was one of the people that was talking about how commentators don't tweet out stuff, or like basically the general gist of like that original thing was that writers don't really get a lot of support for their articles. And I want to make it very clear that like I love that there are articles or even like just high level thought provoking attempt, or at least attempt at thought provoking stuff being written. And I don't want to convey like a sense that we don't want articles like this written. It's like cool to have articles like this. Just because we disagree with it doesn't mean that it's bad that these kinds of things are being written. Obviously, there are like things that we talked about with the way that things are written, or like the way that certain call-outs are done. That could obviously be like adjusted to be a little more PC or something. But I think it's awesome that there are articles like this and we want to support them. It's just that we don't necessarily disagree with them. I really want to draw that line because
I agree with everything you said. And the funny thing to kind of admit, and I've, you know what? Maybe it's the only person, well, this is going to be kind of funny to explain. It only sucks for Dan that he's named. It's actually controversial, and it gets it probably more attention that he did do that. So it's kind of funny with an article. It's like, if it's super PC, everyone agrees with it. It's just like, hey guys, if we could just do a little bit better in this area, then maybe it doesn't get read as much. It's worth thinking about. And I say that as a guy who's had articles written about me and the shit that I've said and done and how stupid it's been. So I've not handled it nearly as calmly as Dan has. I think I fucked everyone's moms, or at least I said I did. It's probably what is how I reacted to it. So we all have growing and maturing to do, and I want to end with what Ravi said. I think it's cool that articles like that are written. One of the signs of a scene that is not very healthy and is perhaps dying is that nobody criticizes anyone because nobody cares. It's only that when people criticize and when they have dissenting opinions that we have a healthy scene. So for that, thank you. And with that, please write as many articles criticizing Dan as you can possibly write and find. It's totally. I'm just kidding.
But next time, maybe go through the videos and give some statistics.
Put a couple of compliments in there. That's okay too. All right. Well, we got a few more minutes with Dan, so I want to jump into our next subject real quick to get his opinions, because that's the power of this show, is we get to hear from some of the people that are at these frickin' events before they go live. So it's GSL versus the world in about 5 hours, which means Dan should have been on site 7 hours ago for a Blizzard call time.
I got to go in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, he's got about 10 minutes. So we're going to start with Dan. I just kind of want to get your thoughts about the event, some predictions. I saw you tweet out something. I don't know if that was if you're just hassling Roddy or if that's an actual thought.
Roddy, there was some clip of Roddy saying he wouldn't let me something like that. So I was like, well, hold on, I can't let this go unanswered. But no, I mean, we had our little production meeting yesterday with Roddy and Maynard and myself and Tasis and everyone. And I mean, the show looks like it's going to be really good. I mean, I'm not sure what I learned there that I can't say. So,
well, you don't have to say that. More in the predictions and stuff. We know our first round matchups and whatnot.
Okay. Well, I mean, looking at these matches, right, I do want to point out a couple of little things that have been happening. Obviously, people should have, if you really keep track of this type of thing, you should have seen that Showtime is kind of killing it in a few tournaments online. Yeah. He's been practicing in Korea. He threw out innovation and stats. So, that's maybe he can make some upsets here. That would be pretty crazy and pretty sick.
He's been there for a little while, right? He was there for a
Yeah,
couple weeks.
Yeah, I think he's been here a couple weeks. If I'm
Well,
not
he's been here since what was the most recent WCS event?
in Valencia.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
that it was 2
So
weeks ago,
at
or
least 2 or 3 weeks now.
3 weeks maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was there too, but I don't remember. But yeah, like I think it's like if you look at all these matches, there's some that are one-sided, like Cyril Kelliger, and then you would think that Stat Cyan will probably be one-sided, and Maru Su, in my opinion. But other than that, I think it's like pretty good matches overall that can go both ways. And like the thing is, you gotta be careful. Yeah, like Dark smash knee lately, right? But that was weeks ago. It was weeks ago. So I'm not, like from 1 week to the next, people's play can look a lot different.
And Neve's good on the adjustment too. Like he lost
Yeah.
maybe the whole